Music. But more importantly, what is music? Is it the collection of just a bunch of silly sounds together? Or is it just a part of nature? Or is it the simple act of just sharing music with a friend? After all, that's exactly what music was made for. This is even seen in nature with animals like whales, birds, hell, even mice at supersonic levels. So when someone asks me, what is music? I simply just say sharing, because it's what we've been doing for millennia, even further back since caveman times, and it's just been slowly evolving into something beautiful. Okay, maybe not everything's beautiful. Music has always been a huge part of my life, as you can see with my wall, and that's been my main source of motivation and determination to make this school project, this video. So to truly understand where music came from, we need to go back to early human days. The first music created by humans was likely to be a part of some sort of ritual or celebration. From what we can imagine, it was more than likely an orchestra of chanting and dancing, all creating this music. Back then, there was very little gap between the musician and the listener. It was more so a community-based thing. This massively contrasts what we experience in today's society, where the gap between the musician and the listener is huge. Let's fast forward a few millennia. It's the late 5th century BCE. The story follows a man who went by the name of Pythagoras. Yes, that same Pythagoras that invented that theorem that we all know and love. Wink wink, nudge nudge. Pythagoras was walking down the streets of Samos in Greece when he walked by a blacksmith and heard the clanging of metal. This caught the attention of Pythagoras and he went to go investigate. Pythagoras saw the blacksmith hammering a sword with different sized hammers. Depending on which hammer the blacksmith used, the metal would give off a certain ring at a different pitch. Pythagoras then studied this and realized that it aligned with certain mathematical ratios. Unfortunately, this story isn't true. However, Pythagoras still did find out these mathematical ratios aligning with music. The real story is speculated to have been Pythagoras getting a piece of string and then getting another piece of string that was half its length. He then had these strings tied tightly and then plucked them. He discovered then that the one that was half as long was an entire octave higher. In the 1880s, a certain thing was invented. The record. Wait, no, that's vinyl. The record. The invention came along with the first ever device able to record audio, which was the phonograph, invented by Thomas Edison. The invention of the record was monumental for the history of sharing music. However, it was only really available to those who were very wealthy at the time. Apart from the fact that it was only really available to those who were very rich, it was still huge for music because it was a whole new way of sharing music with people, and not only that, recording music. Not too long after, we would get the invention of the radio in the 1890s, which was even bigger for the world of sharing music. The radio is able to broadcast any music to anywhere if you have a good enough signal, that is, but it's still used today and is one of the main methods on how people listen to music, whether they're driving to work in their car or if they're just sitting at home and like the radio and the bit of chit chat that goes on in between. Radio is by far the most used device for listening to music today. It is used in 75% of developing countries, which is quite a damn lot. And one of the great things about radio is that it isn't just used exclusively for music, it's also used for stories, news, and ideas for culture, which has overall pushed the world a lot of steps further. 80s was a very special time for music, but more specifically for sharing music. With CDs and cassette tapes being mass produced, it was easier than ever to collect and share music. People back then would make things called mixtapes, similar to what we would call playlists today. However, it was a bit more difficult for them back then. You see, with playlists, we have every song at the tip of our fingers, but back then, you either have the original cassette and record it on your stereo, or you listen to the radio and record it there. So it took a lot more time and a lot more effort, but in the end you would have a little cassette tape that had songs that you liked that you'd give to friends, family, loved ones, anyone for that matter. People really began to fall in love with bands and artists, mainly due to the fact of MTV. Both of my parents would tell me stories of how when they were younger, their whole family would sit down in the living room to watch Top of the Pops, a show that was hosted by MTV and would showcase music videos from artists who would reach the top charts for that week or month. The digital era of music really began with the website called Napster. In June 1999, Napster was created for the sharing of MP3 files. Napster wasn't the first website to do this, but it was by far the one that got the most traction. At its peak, Napster had 80 million users, 80 million people just sharing music with each other. Unfortunately, not long after Napster's release, it was shut down due to piracy reasons in 2002. Although being short-lived, it paved the way for future streaming services, which are huge. If I asked you to go up to someone random on the street and ask them what they use to listen to music, they'd more than likely say Spotify. Spotify dominates any other platform when it comes to streaming music, and I think it's due to how cleverly Spotify have constructed this way of sharing music. Sure, you have the traditional share button, but then you also have Spotify codes, shared playlists, blend playlists, and the ability to make any of your playlists public. So whenever one of these functions are used, it's not just the music that's being shared, it's Spotify's platform. However, Spotify has a big problem. Spotify is infamous for underpaying their artists. For every stream an artist gets, they get 3/10 of a cent. That is $0.003. So you might ask yourself, why in the world would any artist put their music up on Spotify? And the answer isn't all that surprising. Spotify has so many users that artists, when they're really big, don't really care for when there's not too much money coming from individual streams. They care about volume. This makes smaller artists have a really hard time making money off music on Spotify. However, since Spotify is the most used streaming platform, they need the people to listen to their music to grow bigger. They need people to share the music. I hope now that after watching this, you understand a little bit more about the history of sharing music. If you enjoyed this video, please take the time to go share a song with a friend. Really connect with them and bond with them over a certain artist or a song you like. Gain a little bit more insight to who you are friends with, who you know, who you love. Throughout my time making this video, I managed to come across some old songs, some new songs, and it really makes me feel good sharing the music with people. Especially now knowing how much history there is behind it and how long it took to get to this point. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Bye bye.